Welcome to Transformer CEOs with me, Erik Schmidt, your host. As well as hosting the podcast, I also run a successful consulting and advisory business working with chairmen, CEOs, and investors on helping them to achieve great performance in their companies. I have one such CEO with me on the show today, Erwin Wieffering. Erwin is the CEO of SafetyClean and has been through multiple transformations in his time. Highlights on the show are his thoughts around the little bit of craziness and resilience that all Transformer CEOs need. He talks also about the importance of balance in all things, particularly health and family. And finally, he also stresses the significance of having great talent around you who share your vision. I hope you like the content. If you do, please show your appreciation. And we love a comment because here we thrive on feedback. I hope you enjoy the show and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. So Erwin, 20 years at P&G, president for Europe at Britax, CMO at Verisure. What made you be the right choice for CEO at SafetyClean?
It's a great question. I think the combination actually between, what I did in Verisure, and, obviously the understanding of what we were able to learn in Procter, from a leadership and strategic, I would say, thinking standpoint, probably has been the ideal combination for me getting into the role of CEO for SafetyClean. Verisure was, in my view, a bit in a similar situation as SafetyClean. It was a federation of many country organizations that was designed by the CEO, Elston Lally, to actually bring into one company, one Verisure, through a replicable, I would say, go-to-market model, which I, helped, to kind of create together with the business development leader, Louis Gill. And that model was obviously something that the market knew about because Verisure has been a very successful, I would say, growth trajectory since then. That philosophy is something that, the current owners of SafetyClean Apex actually really look forward to see how can we reapply that into a B2B context. And that actually was the main reason why they came to me. And that was also the reason why I got the job.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Now, it's been 5 years, of course.
Yeah.
I will come on to that a little bit later in the podcast. But just to stay with that theme for a second, if I was the chairman of SafetyClean or the owners, and get a little more personal, what did they see in you specifically that they liked?
I think transparency. When I did actually the interview process, I quite quickly shared a view or a vision of what I thought SafetyClean needed, right? Let's not forget, I did this really in the middle of what we, I think, all forgot, but was COVID, right? So I had everything done through video conversations. I had absolutely no idea exactly what I was getting into. But the kind of the prospect and what I was, hearing, what I saw the challenges was really about how you accelerate growth in an underpenetrated, high profitable, I would say, category. And that basically really clicked with the Apex owners. Not only, the approach that I actually felt was the one that I wanted to do, but probably also the way I actually presented that to them, actually made them feel like, okay, we really want to partner with you. We really want to understand how you take the different steps. We really want to actually support you in the way you want to run that journey. And it feels like we have a good chemistry on how we want that to bring to life. And that is actually, part of the reason why, I got into it and we started it.
All right, it's great. And I don't know if we can turn the clock back 5 years and just try and imagine, because this is you pitching for your first CEOship, which is a big career milestone for anybody, right?
Anywhere, yeah.
What was kind of going through your head? What was your kind of mental approach, if you like, as you were moving from a CMO role to your first CEOship?
Yeah, I didn't give it so much thought, if I'm really brutally honest.
Okay.
I was just very passionate about what I felt could be the opportunity ahead of me. And probably that kind of free mind, if you like, and my conviction that, having lived this through in the Verisure, I would say, world before, maybe gave me that confidence that I thought, okay, I think I can really, make a difference here for this organization, the state in which it is, the kind of opportunity that we have. And that actually created that, like I said, chemistry. I think a lot of this, when you are in interview process, right? It's not only about, is the person having the right experience or capabilities, but it also sits in, okay, is the energy right? Is actually the motivation right? Is actually the way the person, describes and has the strategic thinking, as I always call it, to come to a sort of an end product right? That, I think, was what made the magic work in my favor.
And it's great you mentioned motivation. So that's kind of one of my questions as well, is about, if we think of CEOships, I guess tough to get, even tougher to keep. Tenure in CEOships is declining right now. So what was the motivation for you to take on that role?
Yeah, a bit like I said, I was actually also a bit curious, probably, right? I am a very curious person in general. Even in Procter, I've never had, a job longer than 3 years. There was always something on the move. It was also part of, obviously, how that company ticks, but that also has formed me in the way how I developed myself, my own interests, but also how it actually enabled me to constantly look out for the new, right? Mm-hmm. This was definitely new, right? Mm-hmm. Because I'm a consumer guy. So I love consumer marketing, marketing by profession. And now all of a sudden there is this B2B topic. Like, oh my God, right? It's kind of like B2B. I don't know anything about B2B. Is it actually true that it is, quote unquote, behind of what the consumer marketing world actually pretends to be? Or is it just kind of a myth? So that was also the curiosity that I had. Plus, like I said, having lived through what I thought was an amazing and exciting journey in Verisure, really at the start of what became the acceleration plan for Verisure, felt for me like, okay, well, would it be possible to actually repeat that one more time? So that, because, who would, you almost need to be insane, in my view, to kind of jump from, a Britax job where you are president for EMEA and actually everything fine, family in Germany, the headquarters was in Germany, to actually then say, hey, why don't you go to a company in the middle of COVID that you actually have no idea what they exactly do, that has a headquarters in the UK. We were just building a house, all of these things is kind of like, but the curiosity won it. I thought that the ambition that Apex, in this case, the private equity firm that owns it, demonstrated was for me, okay, this feels to me like an amazing sweet spot that, and obviously the opportunity to run your first CEO job, let's not forget that, felt to me like the right combination to actually jump and actually go for it.
Great. So I'm definitely hearing curiosity. I'm definitely hearing developing yourself out of sector, B2B instead of B2C, and we'll come back to kind of what you saw in that journey as well. What about but your final comment around, let's not forget it's the CEO job. So CEO as an ambition, was that like a boyhood ambition? One day I'm going to be a CEO, or was it something that struck you mid-career, or when did that happen? What was the moment?
Yeah, it's funny. I to be honest, it has never really been. What my big dream in life was, and those who know me know that really well, is I wanted to become the marketing director for the brand Gillette. That was always my big dream. At one point, I managed to do that among many other brands. And then it's kind of like, okay, so what's next, right? And that was obviously in a time where it was still kind of very much in the Procter family, in the way actually the Procter machine operates, that moves you around a lot. It's quite disruptive from a lifestyle standpoint, certainly when you're in the career path. But, I absolutely felt the moment when I jumped ship from P&G and actually moved out of that secure environment, if you like, that, okay, maybe there is more to it, right? And I think the the move to Verisure has obviously brought me a lot of insights about myself. This was obviously not surrounded by the people that, are top-notch recruited. This was also people that just work to have a good living. And how do you actually find your way in space, to basically build an organization, a team, a structure, and a vision that actually builds on something that's not there.
Right. So you saw a next chapter and you thought, that's exciting.
And that is what I think the SafetyClean job then further amplified for me. It's kind of, okay, instead of being a CMO where, it's good for capability building, organizational structure creation and all that kind of stuff, but you don't really own the P&L, right? You are an enabler. And I am a person who likes to own the P&L. I would like to make sure that I can really, quote unquote, call the shots if you like, to basically run the right decisions and actually sometimes also fail, which is absolutely great from a learning perspective, but that you at least feel in control. And that's why then the ultimate end position became all of a sudden, in scope.
Yes. So I'm hearing accountability is a big attraction as well.
Yeah. Oh my God.
So just on the Gillette point, did you get your hands on Gillette?
I did, and actually more than that, because Gillette obviously got bought by Procter in 2005, and once you actually got into that space, then Gillette became a division of many other divisions. So it was Gillette Plus, if you like, right? It became then health and beauty, and it health, beauty and grooming, and so we started to actually boosted the whole thing, to another level. But yeah, absolutely, and it has been a fantastic.
And are you still a Gillette man?
Absolutely, yes, every day. No facial hair. It's kind of like I can tell you many love stories about that. Anyway, here we go.
Now you mentioned the P&G story and a lot of moving around every 3 years. I think you said that I guess brings into sharp focus family, right? And what would because I think you and I have similar size families. What would your family say about the journey to CEO-ship?
Well, I think it is fair to say that I could not have done this without obviously an amazing support at home. I think that my wife at one point, actually at a very young age, decided to, put her career a little bit on the side, and obviously has been, in my view, a great, anchor at home. To allow us to do and develop what we have achieved. And I say this we because, behind every person or leader or whatever you want to call it, CEO in this case, is obviously a strong kind of the same foundation at home. And that basically is what has enabled this. But yeah, my wife is also as agile and flexible and curious about, what life brings as I am, because we have obviously seen quite a few places together.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. So, you've amazing career track record. The stories is great to listen to and great to read as well. But even the best careers have setbacks.
Yeah.
Sometimes things don't go to plan, or what looks like the right decision turned out not to be. Any experiences like that?
Yeah, I think that, where I always felt a very, people always talk about this work-life balance, right? I've always thought it a little bit, because what is it? What is work-life balance? You have one life, right? And in the end of the day, you partly your work and partly your family. I think definitely in the days in Verisure where, I was obviously finding my space and role in terms of helping to build, this amazing machine. Definitely the balance got out of balance, right? And that basically was then you also feel a little bit about you are not giving yourself at the best as well, because if there's tension building up at home because you are actually not at home, you're not actually that great father that you should be. You start actually having meetings while you're working in the zoo and all these kind of things. Then okay, hey, this is a bit of a setback. Is this really what I want? Is this worth it, right? And that has been probably my biggest lesson in life, that you can have that great ambition, that curiosity, that whatever you would like to achieve, but please make sure that you're not losing sight of what are the other elements in life that obviously need to be in a balance, right? Yeah. I'm not talking work-life balance, but it needs to be in the right balance. And that's probably, was for me a very big wake-up call.
And thank you for your candor, Erwin. And I'm not surprised knowing you, your candor, but what did you do to put to put that back on the rails?
Well, in the end of the day, I actually decided together with the CEO of Verisure back in the days to actually drive a different path forward, and for me it was actually a good way to start rethinking a little bit about what I actually really think is important in life, and that got me, for example, into a child seat, I would say, business that you probably also know very well, which actually gave me also back that feeling of in control, because I was back into the P&L ownership, which therefore felt that I had more also control over what my agenda should be, versus you are trying to enable constantly a lot of people and a lot of kind of teams, where your agenda sometimes is lived through others, right? And that control element is what I would say is my biggest lesson in life, that you need to keep very much control over your own agenda. Yeah.
Which is a nice link, I guess, to what would your advice be to aspiring CEOs?
Yeah, I think it's obviously always very personal, but my big lessons in life have been around, make sure that if you play multiple roles in life, right? People see the title CEO, but obviously behind the CEO is a human being who actually, is a son of, is a husband of, or a wife of, is a father or mother of, and I think that it's always a bit of a juggling with different balls, but I think that kind of balancing act, that at least, people know who you are and that you have very clear set moments that you are at home. And that's also what I have done, to be very clear when I am traveling, when I'm at home, so that we all can actually manage the agenda around this, right? Yeah. So that balance, I think, is a very important one that, again, is for everyone different, but for me, super important, because if one of these elements get out of whack, you start also feeling that your performance and your confidence level actually declines pretty much everywhere, right? And then you become actually a little bit of a character of yourself.
And people notice when things are out of balance, don't they?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And certainly, because as you mentioned, I'm candor, I'm quite transparent, I am open, very honest. These are very important values for me. So it's also not very difficult to hide, right? It's quite obvious when I'm not actually at my best, and that gets noticed, right? And I probably notice it myself the most, because I'm a fairly high performance junkie, right? I put myself under a lot of pressure all the time, because I always like to challenge whatever the status quo is, or even if there's no status quo, I want to challenge it, right? And because I know there's always something better that we can do with what we have, and that's a belief. It's not always working, but it is a belief that actually drives me a lot.
Right, and you've raised so many interesting themes so far as well, Erwin. I'd love to come back to them in a moment or two, because it takes us nicely into the transformer CEO character and DNA. But just before we move on, I guess your 5 years in SafetyClean. I think the average tenure in Europe for a CEO is 7 years. I'm not asking you to comment.
I'm getting at the end now.
I'm not asking you to comment, but I'm thinking more long term. And particularly with the self-reflection you've been having about what's important in life and true balance, if you like. What does the long term look like for you?
Stay healthy. That is, I think, when you get older, I think health, and definitely because you get more confronted with your parents about health related topics, you start to absolutely, think, okay, well, every day in good kind of the condition and health is obviously super important. I think where I take a lot of energy from, certainly when you grow in your career, is actually how you help and enable others to become better. And so a lot of my time is, yes, traveling around, and but also how you make pretty much every session, not a review session, but more of a coaching session, and how you actually can see how you can make things better. And that normally sparks a lot of energy in the room. If you do it right, of course. I try to be what we then call inspirational, because people need to see the bigger end in mind. And I think when you are so busy in the day-to-day, a lot of people are sometimes forgetting what actually are we trying to solve for, right? And And I always try to bring that kind of, let's say, bigger picture back into the room and then say, okay, how can you aspire to the big goal? And that aspiration and inspiration is what I also take a lot of energy from, right? So that is what you see more. And if that continues in this job, because we still have a lot to go for, that's great. If it needs to go further later, then we will see what happens later.
Fascinating. So I think that's great. I mean, I think what I'm hearing is I kind of keep the strategic focus. That's really important. But I'm also hearing a little bit about building a legacy and getting, kind of thinking about those who are going to come after you and making sure they're in good shape.
Yeah.
Is that
always
picking that up?
I think you're never judged on the results, but what you leave behind. That is, by the way, a very big saying that you have inside the culture of Procter. Because people move so much, right? It is you never get judged on the results, but what you actually have built and what you leave behind, and that is, I think, absolutely 100% in my DNA. Also, when I think about recruiting people, I never recruit people for a role, but always for a development plan. And that is, I think, a very important concept.
Amazing. And yet not everybody thinks that way.
No, and that is actually funny enough. And certainly now when you represent a company called SafetyClean, where a lot of people say, SafetyClean, what? When you actually come forward in interview processes, certainly now in my position, where you talk these kind of things, and people are really wowed, right? Oh my God, in my current role, and sometimes there are big blue chip company, I would say, interviewees that we see, they are even not feeling that in these big companies would normally have a much better infrastructure for these things. Yeah. And we are really in the good position that we can create it because we are growing fast, we are creating roles, and that actually obviously super inspirational for a lot of people.
Absolutely. But it just talks, doesn't it, to the impact that an individual leader's DNA can have on an organization and on the team.
I agree with that.
Fascinating. Let's take a slight step on from this part of our conversation, because our podcast is all about transformer CEOs.
Yeah.
And you've dropped so many hints in the conversation already about not accepting the status quo, and even if there isn't something to change, you'll look for something to change. So talk to us about what you've transformed in your career. What are you most proud of? What stands out?
Yeah. There are quite a few things, but I think what for me personally, obviously, where I feel the biggest impact has been created is actually in my first job as a CEO. Yes, we have transformed. Like I just mentioned the Verisure story. I think I've been part of an amazing team, that has really taken it by the horns and actually changed the way we currently look at, protection, security of families, and all that kind of stuff with alarm systems. The same, I think, is a bit true for SafetyClean. We are a parts cleaning company, right? And parts cleaning is actually happening in every industry, in every kind of sector. Most of them in-house. Some of them, obviously prefer, the full service model that we offer. It's a servicing company. But, we were absolutely a blue collar, I would say, rolling drum, do stuff, kind of, type of company, highly passionate. But if you then think around, okay, you're operating in 14 countries and, actually country A has never spoken to country B, but we are roughly having, you have the same logo on the door, but never talk to each other. The potential that actually has in a market which is having so much growth potential, which has so much to offer when it comes down to sustainability, when it comes down to savings that you can bring to companies, you kind of think like, how do you unleash this? And this is where I think my career, I would say, which I'm very thankful for, has obviously helped me because, we have been trained by Procter how you create a strategy on a page. How do you actually think about the choices you want to make? What do you need for these choices? And so forth and so forth. But seeing that potential and seeing a very, very passionate organization, I have to say that was for me really a striking aha. Like, okay, never heard of this company, but my boy, it is heavy work. But the people absolutely do this with so much, I would say, devotion. How can you make this a much better place to work? How can you therefore make this a much better, I would say, transition for companies that can actually benefit from this service? And that has been actually the starting point where I'm very proud of, because 5 years in, I can say we are not done. The transformation is definitely in the midst of it, but we have moved a lot of stones with the team to make SafetyClean a completely different company.
Now that's fascinating. Maybe you just answered my next question in what you just said there. Would you have described back in 2020? Would you have described SafetyClean as a well-functioning company, but just missing the fifth gear, or was it more of a broken business where there was really a lot of big things, a lot of heavy lifting that needed doing to get it to realize its potential?
No, it was definitely not broken.
Okay.
This has been a company, now we have, 51 years around. Well, you cannot be 51 years around if it is broken, right? But I think the market dynamics obviously are changing quite dramatically. The type of businesses we served were more smaller, I would say, companies, micro or macro companies, where you want to go to mid-sized or bigger companies. The type of industries, very automotive heavy at the start, how you actually look at different sectors with different needs, with obviously different goals and sustainability, I would say, objectives. Our choices, what do you offer? How do you offer? That was definitely not there, right? It was keep doing what we have always been doing. That was successful. Can we do more of it? Where I felt that maybe, but I think the bigger fish is much more into how you bring this service to companies that actually, in my view, have a much bigger, I would say, agenda, growth potential, and for that you need to change basically the way you actually go to market. Yeah, and that has been what I've brought.
I see. So help me understand from the beginning. You mentioned the company is owned by Apex. So
yeah.
did Apex have a specific mandate for you at the beginning? Or is this more the Erwin mandate that I'm hearing?
No, I think they definitely, but because obviously it's fairly unusual. I think certainly when you look at the Apex history, to basically be 4 years into a deal and then change the CEO, right? That is not a common thing. And I think one of the reasons that they wanted to make this change was there is so much growth potential out there. Why are we not actually bringing this to life? What is actually missing here, right? And they wanted to basically change a little bit the leadership into a more commercial, I would say, leadership proposition, right? And that's again why they came to me. So yes, was it an Erwin? I think it is obviously the mix between a desire for how you actually unpick the potential and, a way of actually building a more commercially led organization instead of an operationally led organization. And that is pretty much what actually is the combination of the choice.
Got it. And what would be some of the metrics you would point to, some of the from to metrics in the last 5 years that you're most proud of?
Yeah. So this is actually an interesting topic because the metrics in a organization like SafetyClean, because one of the transformations we go through right now is what we call a digital transformation.
Right.
And the reason why we do that, for example, is that the data quality and consistency, the so-called one data truth that everybody talks about, was not necessarily, I would say, at the fingertips.
You're being very diplomatic.
Yeah. So obviously coming from fairly data-driven, I would say, jobs before, you started to kind of use a lot of hypotheses, right? Now, the most important one, obviously, is how do you drive your sales productivity up, right? And what tools do you therefore need to make your organization, actually follow a certain procedure rather than you are dependent on this one individual that happens to be a great commercial, I would say, person. So that KPI, started to become obviously a very important lever because that also helped us how you recruit, how actually you drive speed of onboarding, how you obviously create much more replication of what you want to achieve. Now, that that model, I think, is working, but I would say the data consistency is still an area that we see productivity going up. We are seeing the sales organization improving. We're seeing obviously the productivity in a way improving. Is it to the levels where we would like it to be? Absolutely not. There is so much more juice in it. And I think now that we are going through the digital transformation, a new ERP system that supports our go-to-market model much better, helps us to drive learnings much faster, right? And that is, I think, an important cultural aspect that we will go through as well, that people don't feel that they are judged, but this actually is a speed of replication of good practices to actually make people better faster.
Yeah. So the ERP system will give you confidence in your data and confidence in your metrics. But if you were to pick one metric that's kind of top of the tree in your business, what would that be?
It will be what we call sales effectiveness.
Sales effectiveness.
Yeah, because this is about a growth story. And I will say, if there's a second one, it will be what we call the cost to serve. Mm-hmm. How do you optimize your service routing? We have over 1,000 service people. We have as many trucks as well. They're driving around. So how do you make sure you decarbonize while obviously optimize? And that is, I think, a very important, I would say, second KPI.
Okay, and that links very closely to what you said about commercializing the business as well. How did you sell the vision of commercializing SafetyClean to your 2,000 employees around the world?
Well, I think the interesting piece is I always talk, obviously, there is only one boss, and that is definitely not me, right? And that is in the end the customer. And it sounds always a bit juicy, but the one strategy that actually a customer will see is our execution. So the story and how we basically rally the troops around what we do in 90 different locations, because it is a very dispersed, I would say, business, is around that customer and have the customer in the room, right? It was like Jeff Bezos always says, keep an empty chair in the room. We literally do that, right? Because whatever we talk, whatever we do, it's not about your commission. It's not about whatever. It is about what is in the interest of the customer that we do and what could we do better tomorrow.
Amazing.
And that is obviously a journey from a company that was used to do stuff, right? And now they all obviously need to think how they do it to actually leave a great impression. And again, the new ERP will help us much more in how we communicate with customers, etc. So that helps, in my view, the way we actually talk also internally, because it is always about the customer journey. The customer is obviously first. It's if you look at our strategy on the page, there's a big red heart in the middle, which is the customer happiness heart, right? Mm-hmm. And everything around this is actually building on how to make that heart beat faster, right? So, and that is obviously a visual way of actually bringing it to life. But at the same time, it is, I think, also a more objective way of looking at ourselves constantly. Instead of like finger pointing, you do something wrong. It is about, let the customer judge whether we do it right and what can we do better. And that is obviously a journey. That is a big cultural shift. And we know that culture is obviously a bit of a slower burner. But in the last 5 years, I can say, the word customer, I'm at least hearing in every conversation, which when I started, it was never even mentioned.
Okay.
And people start actually appreciating that the learnings that we bring are designed to make the customer experience a better one.
Yeah, great. And maybe tell us some stories about how you brought that to life for people, because that's quite a difficult transition to do for an organization that just doesn't get it. But of course, it's possible. And you're living proof.
Well,
of that.
The good thing of our business is we visit customers on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. So it is then not so difficult to put them in front of camera and actually let them talk, right?
Fancy that.
So it was a big aha. Wow, yeah, we can talk to them. Yes, you can. And actually, you know what? They have also something important to say. And it is not only the ones that obviously say, well, we love you, and that you then put in front of the organization saying, oh, everybody loves us. Absolutely not, right? So it is also about how you look at the things that we can improve. And it is sometimes smaller and maybe I would say detailed stuff that actually can make a big difference. And so bringing customers into the conversation, I think, has been obviously an important one. Do we enough of it, Erik? I don't think so. I think we should do much more of it. Also listening to our workforce more, like what do you encounter? Because that is my biggest research. I spent millions in my career on market research. We have actually an organization that is in touch with the market
every day,
every single day. Mm-hmm. So having that conversation and seeing what we can help to build, the need in a much better way, I think is also kind of creating that balance to the level that we are currently operating. Mm-hmm. And you see that consistency coming through, right? I think, and that is obviously delightful. The way I do it personally, every week, I'm sitting either in a truck or I sit in a car with a sales guy. And it is not because I want to come here across that I have enough time, but I really want to make sure that all the layers between me and whoever actually manages these people are actually filtered out. And that I hear from the horse's mouth, basically, what is it that they actually are thinking of? Are they actually, quote unquote, on message, or are they actually completely lost? And I think that obviously also creates quite a lot of, I would say, empathy, and that, what they call the CEO is in my car or in my truck, is for me also a way of actually understanding how far are we on our own journey. So it's my personal proof point.
So it's your litmus test.
And I think that it's actually a funny story, because the way I have started to build my kind of, let's say, I call it every week I travel to a country, and because I do that, the preparation should be use existing materials, right? That's always, I think, very important. But the structure I always do is day one, when I go in, I just be on the road. Mm-hmm. And then day two, normally the review starts, right? In terms of, and which I already mentioned, I think I like to make this more coaching session kind of like. But then I obviously use the experience from the day before.
Right.
Now, what does this do is actually, it creates two things, right? One is that people are getting more in the field themselves, because they obviously want to make sure that they prevent a little bit, the big surprises when I start to talk about their own, I would say, organization and their own, I would say, way of working. But at the same time, I think it also creates an acceleration in the way we actually approach the key choices that we have agreed. Mm-hmm. And that brings that whole, I would say, journey on customer first really to life. Mm. So actually, it's very practical, but and I personally enjoy it a lot. So let's not forget that I love to get my service guy out for a lunch and actually talk about their families and lives, because it is a people business. Yep. And we can never forget that.
Fantastic. So you're a real role model for driving this commercialization and customer focus that you're talking
Try to
about
be, at least.
as well. Yeah. And I bet all your white collar teams are out there as well now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's also a little bit of I always say you can do much more, right? And certainly the people that I've hired in central roles, they need to be out in the markets all the time, right? That's why I want to keep my central team lean, because they need to be present to work outside in and not inside out. But, everyone always says, well, I need to actually be more in the market, right? And that is, I think, a good, I would say, sentiment that I like, that people even have self-reflection that I'm there, but I'm not enough there. Mm-hmm. Because if I can do it every week, then everybody should be able to do it every week.
Indeed. So I think earlier you said that 5 years in, you've done a lot, but there's a lot more to do.
Yeah.
So your transformation's not complete in that sense. I think it's Russell Reynolds who did the latest research that said actually only approximately 30% of companies are able to successfully transform. And I guess by definition, the others aren't. So where do you put yourself?
Well, I for me, it's almost like, does it ever stop? Right? That is, I think, probably a more important question, because, when I joined, I wanted to actually build this vision of one SafetyClean rather than having a federation of SafetyClean kind of country organizations. Also from a talent development standpoint, also from a, scale up, leverage, bring value back to companies and customers. So that was the first transformational thinking and this whole go-to-market replication model was obviously kind of like, holy moly, what is this, right? That was definitely for the company transformation one. That was super important for me to actually understand what capabilities do I then need to actually support me on my journey. For some, that was also a mini transformation because I started to build a stronger, I would say, muscle in the center to help leverage that skill. That has become, certainly with hindsight, a very important choice because then we started to work on the ERP kind of change. And why is this important? Because you need to now all of a sudden create a blueprint of your company, which obviously nothing was written down, right? It's completely, we just did what we always have been doing. So how on the planet are you then actually writing the business process maps? You can only do that with the central team because they want to oversee this for the entire company. So, okay, thank God I already had them fairly fresh, but we started to write what we wanted to do as part of our strategic purpose that we defined. Another transformation. Now the ERP is happening, and everybody's completely kind of, let's say, trembling and shaking because, and I must say the resilience of this company is incredible. Because next to most people's day job, they obviously do a lot on data migration, making sure that product templates are obviously aligned. And obviously we now need to follow one template rather than we always did it this way kind of thing. Connection to local authorities and regulators and all that kind of stuff. So it's a tremendous amount of work. So that transformation is happening as we speak. And that becomes the new way of working, that my people in a truck are not working with a printout, but get now a handheld.
Fantastic.
Or my warehouse is not rolling a drum, but has a tablet.
Yeah, what a change. Yeah.
What a change. And I think the next transformation for me will be, how is the organization now designed and developing behind this, right? Because that is for me also a transformation. The rolling the drum is good, right? But what we now need is how you read the data to actually help make better decisions on a daily basis. That's a different capability again. So will it ever stop is my question. I'm 5 years in. I feel every moment has a kind of like a transformation moment. Yeah. And I think this is actually what this company needs.
Yeah, that's great. And I guess if you think about, the way you've pegged the vision so strongly to customer as well, as customers evolve, your organization will evolve. I guess that's the kind of symbiotic relationship you're trying to create.
Absolutely.
For your people as well. Now, speaking to another CEO recently, he coined this phrase, which was transformation absurdities or craziness.
Yeah.
And he was talking about when he first moved into the job, some of the things he found. And I think you just said, for example, nothing was written down in your company. So have you got some stories you can share about some absurdities?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of this, I would say, I put it a bit under the umbrella. You don't know what you don't know till you actually start doing it. So what sounds like good on a piece of paper, and I talk a lot with actually my chairman in Apex, about prioritization. But so when we actually started to do the work on go-to-market, for me, it was kind of like a very obvious way of working. But actually getting 400 people aligned on a replicable, I would say, sales model and methodology, it has become quite an absurd, I would say, because, ambition to actually do this in a matter of, let's say, 3 or 4 months, right? Because all these people had a different way of working. Now you basically push this through, you actually see this and you bring the tools and you think, okay, now let's go. But that was actually the starting point. Right? Because we were building from there on the next steps. So you move from one kind of, let's say, ambition that obviously needs more time to already get to stage 2 that builds on that ambition. And then you quite quickly get into, now we need to recruit more. And that becomes then quite absurd, actually, because you are creating actually, sometimes a bit the wrong flywheel, because you need to make sure that you have your checkpoints much clearer defined. So that is definitely, I felt, okay, probably the ambition that we had to actually put the accelerator pedal on, and we accelerated actually quite a bit, but the ambition was so much bigger, that was quite absurd, actually. And I think this whole business process mapping, flying whatever 100 people into a room and actually start defining, I think it's crazy. Absolutely crazy. But, in the end of the day, the phrase less is more always works. Put a few people with good brains in a room and actually make it work rather than try to make a lot of people involved and include, because it is, in the end of the day, it sounds great, but it leads to a lot of,
and it's very difficult to transform by committee, right?
That's definitely, and we learned this also a little bit through doing, right? Because we felt there were so many new people in, do they know enough about the heritage of the company? So you wanted to make sure you find the right balance. And it became a very absurd process in the end. So we had to break that and stop that in the transformation, where obviously the clock was ticking, right? Because you're spending quite a bit of money on an ERP change.
Indeed.
So anyway, but we had quite some interesting experiences in that front. Yeah.
Very cool. So you've alluded a number of times to one of the critical enablers for any transformation, which of course is the organization itself.
Yeah.
So again, if I get you just to reflect back to 2020, and I know you're a numbers guy, so maybe we use a kind of a 1 to 10. How ready, if you like, was your organization? How fit, if you like, was your organization for what you knew was coming back in 2020?
Yeah, clearly not fit.
Have you got a number? Can you give us a number to focus?
Well, let me 1 to 10. You said, right? I would give it a 4.
A 4, okay.
Yeah, because why a 4 and not a 2 or whatever? I think the passion of the people was absolutely standing out for me. I must say I love to be surrounded with people that actually have a clear beating heart, like, oh, we're gonna nail this thing, right?
Yeah.
But obviously, what we wanted also required a little bit more thinking than just doing, and we obviously implemented quite a lot of quote unquote new tools that allowed us to create more consistency, and I think that understanding on the big picture, and definitely not having a middle management layer, which I think again was one of the big misses in this whole transformation. We are building in the center great people, great business process maps, all this wonderful stuff, very passionate organization. What happens in the middle? Always the same saying. That is where I think our fitness, and our readiness, started to really decline very fast. And we saw that also in engagement surveys, where the people were just not clear on the priorities. It just didn't translate. And so that was a very big blocker of all the great energy and intention here, all the great passion and energy to actually do the right thing there. And in the middle, you basically had a translation problem. And that is what made the fitness go.
And I see that so often in organizations that are dysfunctioning. Yeah. The front line is amazing. What they do and their customer interaction and their care and their love, if you like, for what they do is amazing. But the higher up the organization you go, the more dysfunctional things have become.
No.
And so it's actually in some ways a miracle that what's happening at the front line is still happening. Is that too dramatic, or is
no?
that?
I think obviously everything is a little bit in a balance, but I think what clearly for me was the case is that a lot of, let's say, the people who are really the face of the company to the customer almost made up their own way of working, because this is what we know works, right? Which in a way is a subculture in the culture, if that makes sense. And you then can question what is then the role of a branch manager, or what's the role of a team leader, or, what do they then exactly do to contribute to make that kind of, let's say, experience, that way of working, a better experience. So that is definitely what we.
And it sounds like structure was a big issue initially. Kind of what I'm hearing is lack of muscle at the center, lack of an adequate middle management level. Put it in your own words. Tell me what did you do on structure specifically to get the organization fit?
Because I was so focused on scaling up, I wanted to have the right scalable functions in the center with very strong people that, and the good thing is I had good profiling experiences from Verisure, what we needed, because we went through the same, I would say, journey. So we didn't get every hire right, but most hires, I think, were absolutely what we call on the money, right? Then you have the country organizations where most of the management teams were in place. But again, much more, I report something rather than I think about how to do things better. So that's where we also then made quite a bit of changes to actually drive that kind of, let's say, philosophy through. The layer underneath is obviously a little bit more invisible, if you like, for people like myself, because I had actually created also a bit of a quality stamp together with my CPO. She actually hired me for this job when she was still working for Skill Capital, and then I hired her back to actually become my CPO. Because and together we actually created a bit more of a quality standard of what is the type of profile of leadership that we actually want to hire for this business. But we obviously, it stopped a bit at that middle management layer, right? Because we really wanted to make sure that, because we had a very strange, I would say, engagement score also at the top, right? It was very bizarre that we had a disengaged also senior leadership country management engagement, which we obviously first needed to actually make sure that they are really on the mission and on the journey. So yeah, that is, I think, definitely what we had to do first. As I mentioned before, the transformation for me on the middle management, and that doesn't mean, because I think we have fantastic branch managers. Let me be very clear on that. They know this business model inside out, and it is a fairly niche business model. But I think what is coming and the requirements that it actually has, and actually driving this, famous Richard Branson phrase, happy employees lead to happy customers. This is really what I believe in, right? We need to get our happiness level in these branches up. And therefore we need leaders that not only lead, the task, but lead also the heart. And that will be our next stage in our journey.
Amazing. So let's, because you've every discussion, Erwin, it's brilliant, is loaded with things we could talk about. I'm very curious about the leadership talent in SafetyClean. So you come in as new CEO, you have an exec team. Sounds like you have a weak center, and you have other questions in your mind. So how did you mentally approach that, or practically approach that, in terms of getting to know the leaders you have, deciding whether they were fit for the long term? What did you do?
Well, the good news, in the center, we didn't have that much. Right?
Oh, right. Okay.
So I think my predecessor either, managed most of them out or, they left. I actually don't really know the history of it. But what for me was clear, point one, if you're in a people business, it's probably good to have a CPO. I thought that was actually a pretty bloody obvious topic. But there was none. Okay, well, that's okay. So my CFO was actually doing also HR topics. So HR was, well, not sure. An amazing CFO that was more trained to report rather than to lead a business. So, but we have an amazing relationship now. And I think he transformed himself in the role to actually bring much more value also to the country organizations, but also in terms of how the other businesses. So I thought that was great. Then, because we talked scale, and we had done a very small assessment on how many suppliers do we actually have, and for a company our size, I think we had over 2,000 suppliers. I'm like, holy moly! So procurement and scaling up, because every country organization had its own infrastructure, right? Its own, ecosystem. So how do we actually work much more on scaling up? And because we talk to also fairly big companies as our customers, there was no legal or any of that kind. We talk contracts all over the time. And who is actually checking this stuff? So that was for me actually step one. Step two then became, okay, how do we work on this commercial topic, right? Obviously, I have my experience, so I felt, okay, I can step in. I'm pretty okay in marketing stuff. So, I thought, okay, I can live with this a little bit, but who am I going to hire? So I found a good buddy of mine who also left Verisure that actually joined me, knew obviously the model that we wanted to apply. So that was actually for me an easy actually starting point to drive. So that is actually what we did. And my model, or the model that I believe in, is that you like to have great talents coming from a market organization into a central role. I think it's high risk to hire externally in a central role because these people don't really know how the market operations tick. Our most important market was UK, so we got an amazing guy for the UK organization who I then actually promoted to basically become also, let's say, the COO. Very strong, and that then was reapplied also with the big French kind of country lead, who I made then actually the commercial organizational lead. So that started to become a bit our central team.
And that's a great proof point of what you said earlier about not hiring for a role, but hiring for career and hiring for development.
Yeah. And that was for me super clear, right? And I think we also talked topics like succession planning, which obviously never happened in this company. Because I think you really want to build on what you create and not just kind of constantly, see great experiences, leave. Because this company has a much bigger goal and, in my view, purpose to actually work for than what we are even today providing, right?
Yeah,
so that is.
So as you've been very active in the external talent market. So as you're meeting people, do you have a kind of either formal or informal kind of checklist? Here's 4 things, 6 things, whatever that I must see when I'm hiring external talent into SafetyClean?
Yeah. I have a very clear framework in my head.
I thought you would.
Yeah. Actually, it's funny because I was talking the other day to my GM for Germany, and in Procter we have the 9 success drivers, right? And that it's power of people, power of agility, and these success drivers is actually a fairly good model to basically apply in discussion. Certainly now we were applying this to students, right, that we hired, which was great, right? But obviously has a certain value, but when you talk to experienced people, I think that model even works even better, right? Because you want to talk about strategic thinking, but also how you act things decisively, right? You want to talk about collaboration. You want to talk about how you embrace change and all these kind of things. And these probably are, for me, very important levers that I want to talk next to what are the leadership capabilities this person has. And I always let them a bit talk because I'm always the last in the interview process as usual. Because now if you pass the CEO, then you have done it. But I like to have this much more of a conversation because I like how people build up their stories, how people actually talk about certain things that they are passionate about, and just by how people actually create the context and what type of actions and the results that they actually have, I actually very often know more than enough on how that actually fits in my success model.
Interesting.
And I advise my German GM to actually use these success drivers and apply that to your leadership team that you have, because he just joined us.
I see.
And actually say, okay, how would you make your assessment versus what do you think you need? Because he also actually comes from P&G, so he knows this model as well. And actually, it's quite funny that he said, "Well, this is actually, you're so bloody right. It is, you see exactly where the gaps are, and you also see exactly where we are right on the money."
It's great. You two have a common language now as well.
Yeah.
Is there, in your experience at SafetyClean, is there 1 or 2 factors that always are differentiators between good and great talent?
Well, in our business, I think, it is the combination between fairly analytical, but also super operational. So I call it up, that's why I put a lot of value on thinking strategically and acting decisively. If you have people that can think brilliantly, but you start really questioning, like, how would you put that on the road, right? How would you translate this? How do you mobilize organizations behind this that actually follow you in a way that people understand actually what you are trying to say? And I can tell you, without a shadow of a doubt or without exception, these people that actually have that magical combination, they are very successful in the business, kind of say, that we are running in SafetyClean. Yeah.
That's great. You've got that insight, isn't it? Now, I guess with changing so much leadership talent, you're changing the culture of the business.
Yeah.
And you gave a very good example before about your own role modeling and customer proximity as a means of bringing customer to the heart of your culture. What other levers are you pulling on culture?
Communication. I think we didn't really communicate a lot. So how you actually drive your internal comms. We also have now an internal comms manager, hip hooray, right? Who basically helps really to kind of create more structure around how you bring your organization constantly with you, update them. I always say the good, the bad, and the ugly. So you really create that transparency, and that is, it's not about, there's some part in the organization that's always perfect, and in my case, it's not always. But no, we are in this kind of thing together. That needs to follow through in also the country organizations as well. So that is just one other example that we do, and again, you see the differences where you have people who actually have that combination that I just made. They basically, wherever they are, they make selfies and they actually send that. They have a weekly, whatever, almost their own quote unquote podcast to their organization. Yeah. But I think it is this try to kind of bring the hierarchy down, make it, and I always say, I like this to be a family, right? Mm-hmm. We also call ourselves safety cleaners. You're part of the family. And in a family, not everything always goes well either, and, you can tell each other the truth. Without that, it obviously means that you never see each other again. But also you celebrate. And I think so it is, for me, is a very good way of actually how the culture should be. I'm not saying that is how the culture is at the moment. I think there is still a lot of work that needs to be done, that people feel that this is a serious, I would say, matter, and not, so let's say, it sounds great and I'm just very skeptical about it, because that's probably where, if I would take my assessment, that's probably where we are at the moment, probably positively skeptical. But we just launched also new uniforms for the people, which actually provides more comfort. It's actually a much safer, I would say, outfit that they have. Obviously creates also a little bit more pride in the whole thing. And it's these small things that, hopefully they also feel like we really want to take care of this, and we really want to make sure that, I want you to do a good job, but I also need to give you the right tools. But anyway, there's a lot of things that need to happen still.
It sounds like there's a lot happening, and, albeit there may be more things still to happen. But if I was asking a frontline employee at SafetyClean, what's the expectation of you working here? What would they say? I don't mean in terms of their day-to-day metrics, but how do you operate here? To basically get the support when I need it, and to, be able to do the job that I'm paid to do. This is a slightly more conceptual question. If you were, looking at all the things you are doing and will do to fix your organization to get it fit, how important are those things to the overall success of the transformation of SafetyClean, would you say? Yeah, if I can get you to put a percentage on it this time, that would be amazing.
Well, I actually don't. Well, you say the word fix. I actually have never felt it to be a fix. I think it is really how I believe I need to guide the company or the organization to see the bigger picture, and actually because I love to get as many people on my journey as possible, right? And amazing if you have been around for a long time, that you actually see the light and you want to actually join us on, quote unquote, the movement, right? Mm-hmm. That sounds for me a bit more what is closer to how I like to operate.
Got it.
So in that sense, is obviously massively critical, right? We are a people business. We are, organized over 90 plus locations. It's obviously difficult to have an oversight to understand what is exactly happening in every location. But, with what we are doing, we obviously have much more opportunities to actually, inject learnings, to actually see things happening that, may or may not actually help us on the bigger picture, so that we're not dependent on what a local leader is doing, because that is the company for that organization that actually is resided there.
Indeed. Yeah, that's who they see.
And they need to basically, understand their responsibility. I talk a lot about you're responsible for 2,300 families, at least I am. And whoever leads a team, these families depend on, us to be a great employer, right? So that their families can do what they want to do. And I think that is bringing it more on a personal level to life, I think.
Nice. I like that. I like that a lot. So if you were saying, I mean, you said massively important, getting this right is massively important for the success of SafetyClean. If you were to choose between getting this right or doing a successful ERP implementation, which would you pick?
Well, definitely the people. There's no doubt about it. I think at the end of the day, if we get that right, then an ERP implementation will be successful automatically. And that sounds always very juicy. I know that, but it is 100% true, because also if you see the resilience of this company, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's obviously not the easiest of times in which we operate, right? So the business is not flying off the shelves and everybody feels like we have an easy ride. No, but with an ERP change for us, is probably the first ERP in 50 years that this company has. It's kind of like huge. Mm-hmm. And, of course, people are not all smiling. People are obviously suffering. Everyone is up their limits. Mm-hmm. But you see how stretchy an organization can be as long as you have this transparent and honest communication about this is great, this is okay, we didn't do this 100% right, so you make sure that we have that very honest, I would say, conversation going.
So back to the importance of getting your comms right as
well.
And the leadership. Yeah. Great. Okay. So let's try and pull this together then.
Oh,
so what an amazing story in so many ways. And I suppose it brings into sharp focus the impact of a CEO, because arguably what you've done in the last 5 years is quite different from what your predecessor did in the 5 years before that. So as we think about transformer CEOs, what are some of the qualities that stand out for you? Maybe you see these qualities in yourself, or maybe you've seen it in others who have taken on a stretch assignment, if you like, to turn around a business.
Yeah. Well, I obviously have a few examples around me that I'm very grateful for. And I think that the most important piece is that you need to be a little bit crazy, but at the same time, need to be very convinced about a vision. Because what you're actually doing is you are trying to kind of solve for something that's not there. So you put a North Star somewhere, you see what you have, you want, an ambition you have, but then you basically are trying to write a page and you have no real clue, at least in my case, whether that would actually lead to the promised land or not. So that conviction, that resilience, that kind of, let's say, you stand up, you fall down and actually, keep energy high. That I think I can imagine that there's also a group of people that at one point say, what, kiss my whatever, right? This is not for me, right? But I think that, that intrinsic belief in, but we can make this so much better, come on guys, we can do that, right? And that you basically have a couple of these examples, and obviously the ones that I know, and I also see this a little bit in myself, but definitely I am very humble about my personal, I would say, role here. But where I got a lot of inspiration from were people that actually had these characteristics, very strong in storytelling, very strong in vision, very consistent in what they wanted to achieve. And always putting your end consumer or end customer in the center, because it makes every conversation less personal and it actually unites us around the common goal. And I think that to me is and I'm fairly okay in communication. I think I don't take myself very serious, is probably also, I do stuff that some people are like, you're crazy. No problem, I do it. Like I said, I'm sitting in trucks every week or in cars, and not because I feel, but I'm the big, no, I want to actually really engage with the people. And because that is in the end of the day, what gets me going. Mm-hmm. So that is probably where I see the difference versus, and I'm not saying that other CEOs are not successful, but where other people who are more ivory tower, who are more kind of, let's say, managing from the desk, I'm not saying it's not possible, but I think you create a very different culture in that sense. And that is...
fascinating. What a list as well. That's a lot. But it's interesting. The first thing you said was a little bit of craziness.
Yeah, I think so. I think because you have to be fairly crazy, in my view, to basically create something that is not really there, but you need to believe in it, and you need to then bring, well, in my case, and private equity firm, on the journey, create a leadership team. You're kind of like, well, what if you're wrong, right? Mm-hmm. You put, are you sure? No, I'm not sure, but I believe in it, right? And that, yeah. So that is, but I think you can only do it when you have great support and people actually understand why you want to do it. I guess that's back to the communication.
Yeah. So if you were picking a couple of things out of that list, which for you are non-negotiable for a transformer CEO, which ones would you point to?
100% resilience.
Resilience.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, 100%. And positive energy. Mm-hmm. I, not maybe because I worked for the brand, but I've been very often compared to a Duracell battery, right? I keep going, and that's also because I think I can handle a lot of topics at the same time, but I'm not expecting other people to do the same.
And yet you did comment a moment ago that you said you need people around you, great people around you. Yeah. So, and you gave some stories before about people who you inherited when you joined as CEO. Yeah. And people you've hired. So how do you develop the kind of craziness characteristics, if you like, in your team, or do you?
Well, I think it starts with, if you create quote unquote followers, right? Mm-hmm. Although I very much feel we are doing this as a team, but the followership is obviously, you need to have people that believe in that vision and go for it, right? Mm-hmm. My obviously always my challenge is then to let it a little bit go and actually say, okay, well, but I envision this baby, mm-hmm. It needs to look a bit like that, and you do it now a little bit different. No, I don't think that is right. But actually that juice, that kind of, let's say, I would say energy that you then actually can unleash, is for me a very big topic also in the hiring process, because I need people around me that I don't need to hold their hand. That once we are clear on the vision, that almost kind of, this is how I would translate this, right? And start almost creating their story, mm-hmm. building on the bigger vision. But I have also people that are less like that and need much more of me in helping to shape, but they are much better in the execution of it. So it is also this, you cannot have obviously a one size fits all everywhere.
So right? You need some style diversity in your setup.
Yeah, that is mm-hmm. normal. And we brought in a lot of the diversity topics as well, because this was a very male-dominated business as well. How do you actually bring female talents in, which is again a different dynamic in the way we actually operate as a company, is also important.
That's great. And what are the kind of, what's the antithesis, the opposite of that, in terms of what are some of the killer qualities? And maybe you came across some as you were going through the organization and getting to know people that said, ooh, this might be a great person, but this is not the right spot for them. Yeah. Maybe their qualities were very different from what you've described. And did you come across that?
Yeah, and I'm always a bit so the answer is yes. And the question I always have is it because this is how the people are, or is this because this is what we made out of them, right? But what I absolutely dislike is people who go for their own fortune.
Their own
fortune,
right?
So obviously in an kind of, let's say, performance business we are in with lots of commissions, if people are optimizing their own commission versus what actually is in the right interest of the company, you can talk a great game with me, but you will not have a long history with me either.
Looking back on your transformation journey, which is still underway, as you say, what would you do differently? And I'm thinking of you as a CEO, as a leader of the organization.
Probably a few things. I think that I would say the time I thought it took, and this is clearly on the whole replicable sales model. I would probably have done this differently next time by actually creating a little bit more test labs, and actually go through the entire, I would say, process rather than assuming too much. That is definitely a learning, quote unquote, mistake that I made, or I pushed through the organization maybe with too much, I would say, positiveness and energy, and yes we can, yes we will, happy. Mm-hmm. The reality was different, that people were lost, not having the confidence on actually applying it, and so that is definitely something that I would do differently. Probably therefore also spend a bit more again in the central capability. I always wanted to keep this as lean as possible so that all the investments were right close to the action.
Yep.
Actually, with hindsight, I should have created that, call it squad team in the center, so that you can go in and help drive that, I would say, one way of working that we know will actually create an amazing customer experience if we do it consistently right. Mm-hmm. It was too much left over to the country organizations, like, well, we told you, we deployed it, now up to you, right? And that has led, in my view, to a bit of a slowdown. So that is definitely one that if I look back, what I would do differently, I would do that definitely different, because the leverage and the ROI on that would have been tremendous. So again, my bad, but that's what happened. I would say, on the other hand, we made so many, in the unknown, so many choices that I'm actually super proud of, and also so many fantastic people that we have made excited about a business that, is for many kind of like never heard of it. Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden, it becomes really your kind of daily life. I think that's quite exciting. The ERP change, it's always a bit of an, you have to do it, but nobody likes to do it because there's so many unknowns again. Yep. Yes, I would obviously wish that we have done this faster and earlier, but it was completely impossible. Mm-hmm. Because this organization needs more structure.
Yeah, but I guess what I take as a positive out of what you've said is the ability as a transformer CEO to positively touch 2,000 lives, and by definition 2,000 families as well. Is huge.
Yeah, it's definitely, and I think that's also why you want to employ so many more families, right? Mm-hmm. You want to make this really journey, because one of the key things that I think I have contributed as well is be much clearer on the purpose of this company, right? And we made a lot of choices to really go 100% sustainable, right? And our innovation program, which is completely new, who actually is led by a former colleague of us, Erik, also from Britax, mm-hmm. is all about sustainability. It's all about energy savings. It's all about, making sure that our customers benefit from what they also have as a decarbonization agenda. And again, I'm very proud of that, because we are very clear on what our role is in the chain, right? And that we are not also being very, eager to whatever we can sell, we sell. No, we are very purposeful, and that is also where we actually build and hire the talent for.
So there'll be senior vice presidents watching this, thinking, I want to be a CEO one day. I share some of the same qualities that Erwin's talked about. What would your advice be to them on taking on their first transformer CEOship?
Well, my advice is be very articulated. Well, the good news is it's not anymore what I had in my head. Like I can only be successful in consumer, I would say, industries, right? That was for me the big test, mm-hmm. obviously the big unknown. I can now hand on heart say that, the B2B business is very similar as the consumer marketing business. The only thing is that people make decisions on someone else's wallet, not on your own wallet, right? Which is different, but, I think you have definitely more levers to play. The most important advice I have is be very clear on what is your story, right? And as I mentioned before, my story, given that I was competing to more seasoned CEOs for this position, that my kind of, let's say, vision of what I felt would be a great vision for the future of this company, be very articulated about that. And I decided simply to be a bit brave and actually, without knowing the company, because again, I was not in the field, I didn't see anyone live, to basically do your desk research and actually tell that story on how you think you would like to make that happen, has been for me a tremendous, I would say, game changer.
Oh, amazing! I can hear it in your voice as well. It's amazing. So a few quick questions to close on. So firstly, are successful transformer CEOs born or grown?
Well, your craziness is probably come with birth, I think. I think that, I used to play at a fairly okay level football. And I think, my resilience probably has also been grown when I was very young. I have always kind of tried to push myself, so that's probably more an inherent kind of, let's say, value that I have, or behavior characteristic that I have with me. But all the rest is belief in what you actually want to do in life, right? And I have learned my lessons, as I mentioned, that where do I not want to go, which is go 100% work and forget your other roles in life. Works for me, maybe it doesn't work for others. But at the same time, I think, be very clear on, hey, I want to stand for something. I'm a very purpose-driven person. And if I believe in the purpose and I can see how we can make an impact, then be really articulated about it. That is what I think a transformative CEO should be. Don't just kind of go in and try to manage something. Go in with a purpose and actually where you want the North Star to be.
Fabulous. So I think what I'm hearing is born and grown.
Yeah, I probably, probably right. I definitely would say so.
Okay, cool. Are they, and maybe this is a personal question, is this a one-time gig or is this a multi? Once you've got the taste, you always want to do transformational assignments, or is kind of one enough? And
well, there needs to be enough, I would say, excitement in the opportunity to actually get me going, right? Mm-hmm. I would probably not be the right person to just consolidate stuff. No, mm-hmm. that is fair.
So it's probably likely that once you've got the taste, you're going to want to do it again.
But again, I think I also am very clear that I have proven so far still nothing, right? I think we still have a big mission ahead of us. So in that sense, I'm still very humble because when I think about something else, then I also need to feel that I have achieved.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And what about as we look forward, demand for transformer CEOs rising, falling, or staying the same? What would you say?
Massively rising. I think the market, I don't know, but the market is obviously in a complete reset state, right? Whether it is the craziness of tariffs or whether it is, what happened around us on war, and God knows what's happening in the future, right? And God forbid that we are sliding away to what everyone, has as a fear. But I think the whole concept, and obviously also the technology, is still IoT and how, we are actually enjoying everyday life. That has massive impacts on how businesses actually are being, designed. Mm-hmm. Right? And whatever is great today is definitely not going to cut it through in 2-3 years from now. That is 100% my belief. Mm-hmm. So that speed of transition is, in my view, we always said it is increasing. I think it is absolutely at a very high pace.
Yeah, I would agree. And we love what we do, but we don't do it just for love. So do you think transformer CEOs are paid about right, underpaid, overpaid? What's your view?
No idea. I think you should be paid when you feel you're paid well, or you're paid enough, or you are okay. Again, I personally think that the reward obviously for us sits in how much value we can bring to the company, and then that's so the reward is in that sense very clearly defined.
Great. I would imagine, though, given that demand's rising and the skill is not plentiful, that rates are going to rise for people who have a very strong track record of doing great things with great businesses.
Yeah, well, it is definitely, if you have the right person, then I think it can obviously, it is actually a fantastic ROI.
Erwin, I'm very grateful to you for joining us today. So thank you very much for your time and for sharing your story, your amazing story, but also your points of view and your insights as well, which have been fascinating to listen to. So thank you very much.
Thank you very
again,
much for being here. Yeah, thank you.